I want to thank you for joining us for Preserving America's Historic Music Venues, the first webinar of our 2026 Preserve the Past, Build for the Future webinar series. We are recording this session and it will be made available later on our YouTube channel. I'll also email the link to anyone who has registered. And if you need closed captioning, just click on the Show Captions button below. I'm Lynn Richmond. I am the Communications Officer for the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. And joining me today is Ashley Fry. She is the Director of the Office of External Engagement. Hi, Ashley. Thanks for joining us. Now, music has been a unifying force in American history, bringing people together across cultural, linguistic, and social divides. From blues and jazz to rock and roll and country, these musical forms shaped America's identity. Yet the venues where these sounds were celebrated, clubs, theaters, dance halls, and neighborhood stages, are increasingly at risk from redevelopment, neglect, and changing cultural landscapes. In today's webinar, we will explore the history of these iconic venues, preservation efforts underway to protect them, and the role they continue to play in fostering cultural identity and community pride. We've assembled an excellent panel, and we hope this webinar will educate you about this interesting aspect of historic preservation. Just a quick word about the ACHP. The ACHP is an independent federal agency that promotes the preservation of America's historic places and advises the President and Congress on national historic preservation policy. The ACHP is the only federal agency whose sole mission is historic preservation. A large part of the ACHP's work is overseeing Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, which requires federal agencies and those receiving federal funding or federal licensure to consider historic preservation when carrying out an undertaking. Find out more about us on our website. We'll put that link in the chat. We're really excited about today's guests. They are Dr. Charlie Dahan, a professor in the Department of Recording Industry at Middle Tennessee State University, Rebecca Miller, the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League in Washington, D.C., and Liliana Grubisic, the Director of Archives and Hollywood Bowl Museum for the Los Angeles Philharmonic. Welcome to everyone. Really so excited to have you here. Before we begin, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat box. Now, once the speakers have given their presentations, we'll call on you to pose your question directly to the panelists. So now let's begin with Dr. Dahan.
Hi, how's everybody doing? First, I just want to say thank you for putting this together and inviting me to participate. My name is Charlie Dahan. As mentioned, I'm a professor in the Recording Industry Department at Middle Tennessee State. I also serve on the executive board of the King Records Legacy Foundation in Cincinnati, the advisory board of the Star Jeanette Foundation in Richmond, Indiana, and the advocacy committee of Historic Nashville Incorporated. My work focuses on historic music places across the United States, both as a researcher and an advocate. Much of what I'm sharing today grows out of my upcoming book, so plugging away, due out in November, Don't Lose Your Good Thing, Saving America's Music Landmarks. In it, I examine the people, the politics, and the preservation battles behind some of America's most storied recording spaces. Across all of these places, I encountered the same pattern. A building falls into crisis, then a small group of local advocates mobilize, who are often short of money and preservation experience. And then there is either a last-minute rescue or a permanent loss. And that pattern repeats across genres and regions. In several of these cases, I've stood in buildings not knowing whether they would be still standing a year later. That uncertainty changes how you see them. You realize these are not guaranteed landmarks. They survive only if someone decides they matter. We must resolve that music history deserves the same level of protection as other forms of American heritage. We are very good at preserving the product of music history. We archive recordings, we digitize master tapes, we celebrate the artists who made them. We can stream nearly every song ever recorded, but we are much worse at preserving the places where that music was created. The product survives, but the places often do not. King Records nearly fell to bulldozers and demolition through neglect. Stax Records was rubble before it was rebuilt. RCA Studio A almost fell to development pressure. Bristol waited decades for a permanent home for a museum celebrating the big bang of country music, and the Jeanette and Capricorn complexes came close to being all but forgotten. Music history should be a national preservation priority. American popular music is one of this country's greatest exports and industries. Jazz, blues, country, rock, soul, funk, punk, hip hop, and more. These genres shape global culture, tourism, fashion, language, and identity. Few American industries combine culture, commerce, and identity as powerfully as music. And these spaces, they're not relics. They are or can remain part of an ongoing creative manufacturing process. Music is still written and recorded, performed, marketed, and consumed in buildings just like these. Studios and venues are workplaces. They are the training grounds, the creative laboratories, and community hubs. Preserving them is not freezing them in the past, it is sustaining cultural production. To understand American music history, we must preserve three things: the histories and legacies of the people, the musicians, songwriters, producers, executives, and workers who formed the recording and music ecosystem, the product, and the place. When we lose the place, we lose context, we lose memory, but most importantly, we lose the opportunity to inspire the current and next generation of creatives and entrepreneurs. This responsibility should not fall only on local volunteers and local governments, because these are national stories. Major record labels, companies purchasing music catalogs, and music publishers earn billions each year from the product created in these buildings. They should play a proactive role in preserving the places that produce that value. And preservation is not charity. It reflects obligation and responsible corporate stewardship. Part of the challenge is structural. There is no coordinated national program specifically focused on music industry landmarks. We have the National Recording Registry to preserve landmark sound recordings. We also have the National Register of Historic Places, which recognizes national significance and can unlock incentives like tax credits and grant eligibility. But designation alone does not guarantee protection. It does not prevent demolition, and it does not create a proactive system for identifying music landmarks before they reach crisis. We are still operating reactively rather than strategically. What we need is foresight and coordinated public-private partnership instead of last-minute rescues. Everything I've said about studios and labels applies directly to live music venues. Venues are where artists, professionals, and fans develop, where scenes form and communities gather. Landmark venues are both inspirational and aspirational places. You know you've made it when you play the Ryman, the Apollo, or the Troubadour. When CBGB's closed in New York, a foundational space for punk and hardcore culture disappeared, and with it, a living bridge between emerging DIY artists and legends whose shoulders they stand on. Some of these buildings still stand, others are gone or threatened, and preservation delayed is preservation denied. Independent live music venues contribute more than $86 billion directly to the US GDP and generate over $150 billion in total economic activity each year. They support nearly 1 million jobs, and that impact extends beyond the ticket window into hotels, restaurants, and small businesses. Those numbers make something very clear. When spaces contribute that level of cultural and economic value, letting them disappear is not simply unfortunate, it reflects a breakdown in stewardship. The original Stax building, which is on the left in South Memphis, was turned to rubble after a valiant effort of advocates to try to save it. Today, however, through a public-private partnership, that site was rebuilt and is home to both the Stax Museum of American Soul and the Stax Music Academy. The museum preserves the legacy of artists and record company personnel who shaped American soul and popular music. The Academy invests in the next generation, providing free music education, mentorship, performance opportunities, and more to local students. That investment has helped anchor neighborhood revitalization, so much so that the surrounding South Memphis community embraced a new identity, Soulsville, from Stax's nickname, Soulsville, USA, reclaiming its musical heritage as a source of pride and economic renewal. That transformation did not happen by accident. It happened because advocates, politicians, foundations, and more decided that that place mattered. Preserving historic music landmarks protects not only our cultural memory, but an active legacy and engine of creativity, inspiration, education, and economic vitality. It gives the next generation a place to stand and a possibility of what comes next. And thank you. These are my contact information. I invite everyone to reach out to me at any time to talk about all this stuff.
Thanks so much, Charlie. We really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of questions we get at the end. So anybody who has a question for Dr. Dahan, please put it in the chat. We'll call on you to ask your questions in a little while. But right now, next up is Rebecca from the DC Preservation League. Rebecca Miller.
Thank you for having me. I'm just going to get my video on here. Thank you very much. My name is Rebecca Miller. I'm the Executive Director of the DC Preservation League. We are the citywide advocate for historic resources, and I'm just trying to get this into full screen mode for you. There we are. The DC Preservation League was founded in 1971 to save the old post office building on Pennsylvania Avenue, and we have turned into the leading advocate for historic resources here in Washington, D.C. A building that we've been now working on for several decades is the Howard Theater. It's located at 620 T Street Northwest. It's a freestanding brick building that was constructed in 1910 to serve vaudeville, musical, live show theater for African Americans. The theater, designed by white architect Edward Stork for the white-owned National Amusement Company, is located in the heart of what was historically Washington, D.C.'s preeminent African American community. Here you can see the location. It's actually circled in red. If you can see my cursor, if you're heading, this is north towards the top of your screen, heading south. This is just inside what we call the Federal City, which is within the L'Enfant Plan for the city of Washington. The street that it sits just right inside of is what was historically known as Boundary Street. But also it's Florida Avenue, which then turns into U Street as it heads to the west. And U Street is historically a Black neighborhood in Washington, D.C. It's a hidden gem of African American history. It was, as I mentioned, once referred to as Black Broadway. It served as a thriving hub for African American culture and social change, even amid the Jim Crow laws that plagued the city throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Legendary figures like Zora Neale Hurston and Mary McLeod Bethune found refuge in this vibrant community, while renowned performers such as Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday frequently graced its stages, many theaters that were along this U Street corridor. However, when the city desegregated and Black families began to patronize previously off-limit venues, U Street's economy suffered a significant decline. White-owned businesses encroached on the neighborhood, leading to a gradual erasure of Black Broadway from history. Today, its legacy is mostly preserved only through stories and memories of former residents. And just to give you another little point, if you just go directly north of the Howard Theater is actually where Howard University is as well. The Howard was the first theater in the country built expressly for for Black audiences. Andrew J. Thomas, an African-American man who was previously managed the nearby Minnehaha Theater, located at 12th and U Northwest, was the manager of the Howard for its first decade, bringing in attractions such as vaudeville musicals and road shows. When the theater was not presenting a show, the building was made available to community groups for local variety programs, testimonials, church and organizational meetings, and Sunday afternoon concerts. Thomas brought the Black community together by giving its members a place of both recreation and gathering, a precursor to the activism that would occur later in the 20th century during the birth of the modern civil rights movement. The traditions of community and cultural enrichment were furthered under the management of Shep Allen, who for owners Stifel Brothers managed the Howard beginning in 1931, after the theater had closed in 1929 due to the onset of the Great Depression. Allen recognized that music was a form of social protest. He ushered in a new era of programming that still featured established acts, but placed more on an emphasis of introducing new Black talent through the amateur night contests, providing members of the community with a platform to share their voices. Allen's philosophy on running the Howard harkened back to Thomas's tenure, believing that the Howard was a place that belonged to the local community. It was this shared quality that cemented the Howard as an essential component of the city's entertainment scene. Most notably, the Howard Theater became a routine feature in the Black community's daily life, as the two managers repeatedly demonstrated their understanding of Black Washington in all of its complexities through the talent that they introduced in the events that they sponsored. For the opening of the theater on September 26, 1931, Allen organized for Duke Ellington's return to DC. As Ellington had grown up around U Street, but had been performing in Harlem for the majority of his career, the high-profile billing, which was included notable artists like Benny Moten and Cab Calloway, thrust the Howard Theater towards a new era of success, while simultaneously honoring the city's distinct musical past. Allen brought the Howard into the era of big band entertainment, consistently booking musicians that were nationally known, while balancing these types of marquee performances with amateur nights that launched many up-and-coming artists. And you can see Shep Allen here in the center of the photograph with a number of newsboys. And this particular photo was taken by Addison Scurlock, who is a well-known Black photographer in the early part of the 20th century, and his studio was just down the street at 9th and U Street Northwest. The theater evolved into a space that was directly utilized by civil rights activists towards the mid-century, often the site of fundraising events that contributed to legal and mutual aid funds to be used by community members along with the larger NAACP initiatives. As you can see from the facade, about 1941 is when the stucco was placed on the front of the facade as the times were changing in an effort to make it look more modern, if you can believe that. The civil rights riots of 1968, coupled with the effects of desegregation, contributed to the theater's closing in 1970. In 1973, the Howard Theater Foundation was organized to reopen the venue. It was this organization which successfully sought the building's listing as an individual landmark in the DC Inventory of Historic Sites, which is DC's regulatory landmark law and provides for protection from demolition and then review of any changes that would take place to the building. The following year, the DC government purchased the building for $100,000. And in April of 1975, the controlling organization, the new Howard Theater Corporation, reopened the theater with an event showcased by Black comedian Reed Fox and singer Melba Moore. Subsequently, Chuck Brown and Soul Searchers were among the musical stars who performed at the theater in the 1970s, but the theater then closed again in 1980. And you can see in this photo, Gladys Knight Show from 1969. Over the next subsequent decades, the theater fell into a tremendous derelict at that point. Unfortunately, we have a situation in Washington that our government-owned buildings tend not to be there are no funds that are actually put towards these buildings when they are sitting vacant while the city is trying to figure out what it plans to do with it. As you can see, the stucco facade, a lot of it chipped away. There was a hole in the roof, so the entire interior was destroyed from water infiltration. In 2002, the DC Preservation League listed the Howard Theater as one of its most endangered places for Washington, D.C. And concern for the theater's future, compounded with the total collapse of the roof, grew. In 2006, the DC government responded to the public sentiment of wanting for this particular building to be redeveloped and was seeking a developer to renovate and restore the theater into a multi-purpose entertainment venue. Ellis Development was selected to take the project with the city's pledge of nearly $12 million in district funds to assist the redevelopment. So it took a number of years in order to get this particular project going. And beginning in 2008, the architecture firm of Martinez and Johnson and Marshall Moya Design were responsible for the $29 million restoration that took place for the architecture design of the theater. We had tremendous historic preservation consultation from EHT Traceries, who did a lot of research so that the facade could be restored to its original appearance. This was completed with the assistance of federal historic tax credits as well and Save America's Treasures funding. The theater reopened in 2012 as a music venue, just over 100 years since its opening. Here's some images of the interior. As I mentioned, there had been a complete roof failure. The interior was lost in its entirety. There is no fixed furniture with the exception of the bar, so it has the opportunity to serve as not only a space for celebrations, fundraising spaces, concerts, plays. So it has a space now that can change with whatever type of performance that will be taking place there. And more recently, in 2004, 2005, DCPL received a grant to assist the leasee, who has a 75-year lease on this building, Ellis Development, because their HVAC system had failed. The one that had been put in 2012 failed. The company who they had purchased it from went out of business during COVID, and so they needed to have a wholesale new system put in. DCPL was fortunate enough to receive a grant of $750,000 from the National Park Service's African American Civil Rights Grant Program, which paid for the bulk of this particular project, in addition to a grant from the DC Commission on Arts and Humanities, with the HVAC system totaling about $1.2 million. In addition to doing the work on the building, there is an update to the National Register documentation that will be submitted shortly that will include this site as a civil rights site as well for its significance and not just its musical history. And then this past summer, there was also a solar installation that was put on the roof of this particular building. You can't see it from the street. It does have a flat roof. And it's estimated that there'll be a 40% reduction in heating and cooling energy use for the new system that was put in, which will effectively assist the operators in the long-term viability of this particular building. So today, the Howard continues to foster both artistic and political achievements in this era of history. And we are very proud of our theater and what it promotes in our city, not only from a historic perspective, but also a sustainable perspective. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Oh my gosh, it's just so beautiful. I've definitely been there for a show, and I love that it has that flexible floor that it can be just, like a normal row after row. I like the tables. It's really a spectacular building, and I'm glad that it's been saved. But we'll pivot now. Thank you again, Rebecca, to the Hollywood Bowl. We'll just go straight across the country to Los Angeles, California, and Liliana.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for having me on this webinar. I apologize for not having my laptop functioning. Zoom is just not allowing me to join, so I will be doing my presentation with the help from Lynn and her team. Not to waste any second, my name is Liliana Grobisic. I'm director of the archives for the Los Angeles Philharmonic and director of the Hollywood Bowl Museum. So my job is kind of going back and forth between two organizations that actually have a very long-standing public-private partnership between the Los Angeles County and the Los Angeles Philharmonic Orchestra. And that partnership goes pretty much, from the very beginning of the history of the Hollywood Bowl. You can actually move to the next slide. I'm going to give you a very, very quick history lesson, and then I will concentrate on three different aspects of the Hollywood Bowl as an amphitheater, as orchestral shells and the history of those shells, and also bring back the conversation to the museum that I'm overseeing, which was built on the historic tea room on the grounds of the Hollywood Bowl. We go to the next slide, showing you, again, this is a very quick history. What happened? Property was purchased in 1919 by a group of theosophists, actors, musicians, and philanthropists who wanted to build a community park and arts center. And this is a really important feature of what Hollywood Bowl in its infancy was about, and that is to build a community park, outdoor venue for the enjoyment of every citizen of Los Angeles. The money came from wealthy individuals, and the organization was called Theater Arts Alliance. It didn't last long due to disputes between the founders, the money and whatnot, and a new organization was formed in its place in 1920. Pretty much, combining the spirit of this original idea. The organization was called Community Park and Arts Association. These driving ideas, came on the tail end of progressive era, where there was a huge park movement and believed that performances in open spaces are bringing cultural refinement, cultural education to citizens. In 1922, the official Hollywood Bowl season started in July, and it was called Symphonies Under the Stars. That was done with Los Angeles Philharmonic performing. So the relationship between the LA Phil and the Hollywood Bowl, goes back to very beginning of this venue. In 1924, there was another name change. The Community Park and Arts Organization was renamed and restructured to be Hollywood Bowl Association. This was actually done a few months later. A few weeks later, that organization decided to deed the property to the County of Los Angeles. And this is the very beginning of that public-private partnership. And there was a very interesting moment on the stage, once all of the debts were cleared, bank, loans, were paid off. The founders came to the stage and ceremonially burn the mortgage and proudly declare, "We, the people, own the bowl." In 1926 and 29, we had a couple of, each year brought a new orchestral show. In 1939, the tea room, the Patriots Tea Room, was built as part of a WPA project. In 1984, that Patrons Tea Room was converted into the museum. And unfortunately, this is the case of things not going well in terms of a preservation. That historic tea room was leveled, and a new two-story building that houses my museum is standing on its place. This happened precisely because there was no design guidelines for the Hollywood Bowl, which was issued, unfortunately, after the museum or the tea room was leveled and new museum was built. And in 2004, we got a new orchestral shell. We can move to the next one. These are slides. You know, this is an image how the seating amphitheater looked like before a permanent amphitheater was built. This is from 1923. Everything was makeshift, improvised, staged with canopy protecting the musicians from the elements, and also the seating that is flexible, movable, benches and seats. The next slide just gives you just a different view how that location looked like. And the next slide actually is the beginning of modern Hollywood Bowl. This is a snapshot from the grading and construction of the balloon-shaped seating arrangement that started in 1926. You know, they completed the whole thing within 6 months. The next slide gives you a sense how that balloon-shaped amphitheater looked like after everything was built. This is designed by a famous Pasadena-based architect, Marion Hunt, who also was the architect for Rose Bowl. But I just like the comparison between the previous image and this one to show you how the natural ravine that was called Bolton Canyon or Daisy Dell was regraded and turned into this spectacular amphitheater that currently seats 17,500 people. The next slide gives you that graphic representation of the balloon-shaped seating with 7, distinct, sections, and how there are basically enveloping the stage. The next slide gives you a current view of the Hollywood Bowl from the drone. Again, everything about the amphitheater remained almost untouched, except for ADA accommodations and some seats, having to be moved because of the addition of acoustical towers. And the next slide is just, to make you kind of jealous of Southern California landscape, where you actually see the bowl at dusk, with the, mountains in the background. We're moving to the next one. I'm going to go quickly through 4 different designs for orchestral shell. The very first one was built by Allied Architects in 1926. Allied Architects was a consortium of Los Angeles-based architects, and it had this semicircular shape. The very next year, Hollywood Bowl got, and we can move to the next slide. We got a new shelf designed by the son of the famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright. And it was very unusual, pyramid-like, Mayan-inspired shell that, according to historians, was one of the best, acoustically best shells of all of the four in the Bowl's early history. But the management of the Hollywood Bowl, they were not really enthused about this kind of too modern looking shell. So that one came down in 1928. The next slide, please. And Lloyd Wright Jr. was invited to come back the following year. And this is the design that he came back with. It's more elliptical rather than circular. Again, that one went down, and the next year, with the next slide, was the one that lasted for 74 years. Despite the fact that it had flaws, acoustical flaws in terms of musicians not being able to hear themselves playing, the sound not projecting into the audience. But over the years, we can move to the next slide, please. In 1970, as the Hollywood Bowl started as performing live performance venue, mainly focusing on classical music, but over the years, starting in the 40s, 50s, and particularly 60s and 70s, the shell became really limiting for pop acts. So Frank Gehry, who was the architect who designed the Walt Disney Concert Hall, for the winter season of the Los Angeles Philharmonic, was invited to do cosmetic change to really improve, acoustics. And he came up with this idea of having sonotubes, and they were industrial grade cardboards that were placed along the shell, inside of the shell, and on the wings. And then image on the right actually shows you how that looked like from the inside of them. So the sonotubes were also placed above the musicians. We're moving to the next attempt to solve the acoustical issues that the Hollywood Bowl had, in that 1929 shell. And this is another Frank Gehry attempt to fix the acoustics. These were called spheres, fiberglass, about 11 or 13 fiberglass spheres that were placed, to fix that perennial issue of acoustics. People in Los Angeles, jokingly call them champagne bubbles. This lasted until 2003-4. We can move to the next slide. You see, the left is the day view of the Hollywood Bowl, redesigned by Hodgetts and Fung. This was a multi-year project that involved 1996 proposition that brought $18 million to specifically earmarked for renovation of the aging, acoustically inadequate Hollywood Bowl shell. And then the next slide, please, shows you the major improvement this Hodgett and Fung design brought was the acoustical canopy, a halo that has the louvers that can be adjusted, and the audio audio sound, can be projected onto the audience. The next image gives you a sense. These are designs on the left of all of the iterations of the Hollywood Bowl shell over the years done by Hodgetts and Fung. And also their rendering showing specifically how much bigger the new shell is compared to 1929, and that's about 30% increase, which allowed entire Los Angeles Philharmonic, which counts, 106 currently 106 musicians, to actually fit nicely without, getting too close to other instruments. And the next slide. Let me see what I have. I'm moving to the Hollywood Bowl Museum. This is how it looks like currently. The next slide gives you a comparison of the current building against what was demolished in 1995. This was original Patron's Tea Room built with funding from Works Progress Administration in 1939. And what the contemporary architects, did, they preserved only two elements of this, historic structure. On the right, you actually see the stonework that made this historic, tea room, very special. Luckily, that is preserved, and we can move to the next slide, please. And that the image on the right shows you the museum patio, which this is a current photograph of it. The canopy above, creating the shade, was also done by Frank Gehry in 1982. And the last two slides show you inside of the museum. On the left is the permanent exhibit that I just took down a couple of months ago, and I'm preparing a new one for June to launch in June. And you can see the outlines of the fireplace, original fireplace from the 1939 tea room, which is contrasted on the right. And the last one is actually just, a bigger view of the inside of the tea room. This is a very good example what happens when an organization does not have design stylistic guidelines to keep the coherent, visual look and feel of the Hollywood Bowl, which was, built in the 20s in the streamlined modern style. And this is all for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liliana. Stay on the screen because we're going to have our question and answer session right now. But I want to thank you and Dr. Dahan and Rebecca Miller for coming here today, for your wonderful presentations. They were all so interesting. I'm hoping that our viewers will join in now and start entering some questions into the chat. But I actually have a question for you, Dr. Dahan, but I think that anybody might want to answer this. What do you see as a viable path for proactive advocacy to preserve venues and recording studios?
That's an excellent question, and I attempt to tackle it in the conclusion of my upcoming book. And I kind of alluded to it a little bit in my presentation, which is, I think first we should conduct some kind of survey or inventory of the buildings that are National Register eligible, or maybe eligible on a more of a local or state level, and just sort of get an idea and status of what buildings remain, where they're at, and then, I really firmly believe that, the music industry needs to be brought to the table, and we can sort of show them where these synergies really worked very well in their favor. Concord, which owns Stax, they benefit tremendously from the fact that there is a museum, there's this music academy going out, and there's a place to sort of sell and promote its catalog. Sun, which is now owned by Primary Wave, which is a large catalog acquisition company, they also benefit from the fact that, Sun is still there in Memphis. And so that brand In fact, I think they're revitalizing I think both of them have revitalized the labels and putting out new stuff. So I think first just a sort of an inventory to know what's exactly out there, and then reaching out to the owners of those buildings, and then in my dreams, those companies would create kind of a foundation that would have money available to these places when the time sort of comes where they want to preserve them.
Thanks so much. Rebecca or Liliana, do you have anything to add to that?
I would add a fact that public-private partnership that we're so proud of between the county and the Los Angeles Philharmonic is something that helps, with preservation. And also, unfortunately, if you don't have a design guidelines, things happen ad hoc. And this is the case of the Hollywood Bowl in, multiple, buildings were not done in the same stylistic, style. And just to mention that the Hollywood Bowl finally got onto the National Registry of Historic Places in 2022. Too late. There were attempts to do it in mid 80s. And so I think that just brings the venue into that iconic music industry as a landmark and historical elements in it.
So I would say in DC, one of the things that we do often is we don't have one specifically for music venues, but we do thematic studies. So apartment buildings, banks, different types of things. We have an African American civil rights multiple property document. And through that type of documentation, you can kind of write the history, and then you identify properties that are potential for designation later. And then you don't have to kind of like rewrite it over and over again. It can fall under that particular multiple property document. And in DC, I mean, we have one of the strongest laws in the country, or the strongest. And so when we designate locally and then forward to the National Register. And so we have a pretty good process for doing that. And so that's, I mean, doing music venues would be really interesting, I think, for DC as well. But it's a good way to kind of get that information into one document, so that way you have something to nominate things under going forward.
Great, thanks. So we have a question from Heidi Slaybaugh. So Heidi?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead and ask your question, Heidi.
Yeah, I was wondering, because the Hollywood Bowl wasn't listed until I think somebody said in that just a couple of years ago. Wondering how they determine the period of significance, and then which version of the bowl design, since it changed so rapidly early years, been so many changes even recently, how that National Register nomination was written into what version of the bowl was deemed significant.
Sorry, my Zoom kicked me out.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Heidi, can you repeat that?
Sure. I was looking, speaking to the National Register nomination for the Hollywood Bowl, and wondering how the period of significance was defined, which era, and then which version of the bowl was the actual design that was deemed significant for the National Register listing.
I understood or heard the first part of the question. Can you repeat the second part?
Yeah, so the first part was the period of significance.
Yeah.
And then the second part was so many iterations of the bowl design itself. Which version of the bowl was included as significant in the National Register nomination?
So the period of significance was 1920s to 60s. And not all of the buildings were included. Obviously, you have supporting structures, and my museum was excluded just because it came, too late in 96, 30 years ago. And it was outside of the guidelines. And the current shell is included as continuation of the streamlined modern style that the 1920s original structures were built in.
Great, thanks.
Sure, thank you.
All right, we have a question from Stephen Zink in the Q&A.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Hi,
Okay.
Stephen.
Well, I don't want to get too personal and talk about my project. We've got a theater in Louisville, Kentucky that was built in 1915. It was very close to being destroyed in the 70s. It was actually, it had a demolition permit on the front window. And we've preserved it since 1985. There's plenty more to talk about. I guess my question, and maybe to you, Rebecca, since you covered the Howard, but my question is, where do we go from here with ACHP? I didn't even know there was such a thing as ACHP. Although I want to add two more things. We do work closely with the National Trust for Historic Preservation and also another organization. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. It's called LHAT. It's the League of Historic American Theaters. And Lynn, I did put a link in somewhere. I don't know how to do all that kind of stuff.
Okay,
But
I'm going to share it right now in the chat.
so I really don't, I'm not trying to dive down to very specific questions for purposes of this webinar, but I would like to know how to talk about it some more offline.
Oh, sure. Well, you're welcome to contact me. My email is rebecca@dcpreservation.org. We have a number of preserved theaters here in Washington, but generally speaking, if you have a group that's willing to raise money and you're willing to partner with the city and be creative with your financing and raising money, and finding an operator, you needed an entire team to do it, to be quite honest.
What's your email again?
Rebecca@dcpreservation.org.
I just put that in the chat too. So, yeah, I don't know, Charlie and Liliana, if you feel comfortable sharing your emails. I know that you did on your presentation, Charlie. But yeah, if you want to put it into the chat, I'd appreciate it. But
I'm not sure how to do it from my phone, so
okay.
if you,
I will do that then.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I actually have a question. So how important is it to have community buy-in to these preservation projects of especially historic music venues? Like Rebecca, you had said that the Howard Theater was just a wreck. Like did community sentiment and support play into that project, and the same with the Hollywood Bowl?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so I've been at DCPL for almost 23 years and worked on the Howard Theater the entire time. And people had been working on it. There had been efforts to revitalize it for a number of years. DC, after the riots, our population declined significantly. The area of U Street in particular declined. We hit kind of our rock bottom of population in 1990, and then it's slowly went back up. And so around 2000 is when things kind of started picking up again, raising awareness. Wasn't until 2005 or 2006 that they were able to kind of convince the city that people wanted this. There was a big resurgence of people back into the city. And our population was going back up again. And a lot of people moving to the U Street area, LaDroit Park, Shaw, which is right around this particular. Shaw was a very hot part of town as well. And so, and with that theater coming back online, it allowed for other properties as well to be redeveloped, as well. So, but it was, there was the citizens associations, the advisory neighborhood commissions, which is kind of our local elected official, within the neighborhoods. And then organizations like the Preservation League who really wanted to see these coming back. And this was all done part of another large development that circled that corner. And it's right by the metro as well. It's a block from the metro. And so all of these things really highlighted for the DC government that they needed to invest in it. But we also had the opportunity to use this other financing from the federal government with tax credits and whatnot. It was a pretty complex deal.
I can kind of chime in there too. And community involvement is incredibly important, and buy-in. Two of the examples that I dig deep into. First is the Star Piano Jeanette Records site in Richmond, Indiana, and there was kind of this fulcrum moment in the history in the sort of mid '90s where either what was remaining was going to be leveled and erased, or there was going to be an investment to preserve what remained. And so they asked the citizens, what do you want to do, save it or raise it? And it was a 50-50 split in Richmond. And the sentiment on the get rid of it mostly had to do with, we don't want to have to bear the cost for this. We have other issues at hand, hospitals and roads and stuff like that. And the other half, of course, was this is the history of our community. This is a positive thing. And then in the Stacks example, that group that rebuilt the building and the music academy from the get-go engaged the local community and sort of said, we're here to be a part of the community. We're not here to. This is not a top-down type of endeavor. This is, we want you all involved. And the sort of feedback I got from those people was, who were involved in it, was they were all stakeholders, whether it was they were excited about it, whether it was they kind of cleaned up their front yard to make the neighborhood look a little nicer. And then eventually they renamed the whole neighborhood after the museums. They call it Soulsville. So I almost can't see how you can't do it without the surrounding community really having a stake in it. Really is it's really, to me, is
I'm
the
sorry.
first thing you should be doing when you're working on something like this.
From the Hollywood Bowl perspective, I can just add a note that original idea to form a community park came from the grassroots efforts, and it was fundraising that was done by volunteers, and anybody who was willing to listen to the pitches, how to protect what they called originally our community endeavor. And that ethos pretty much stayed to this date. Without a community, you don't have, performances, presented. There was a backlash, coming for the redesign of the shelf in 2004 or years leading up to it. And that is coming from conservators, mainly concerned about losing something that became an icon for Los Angeles nationally and internationally. But ultimately, it was a community efforts that sustained the organization over the years, and with this public-private partnership allowed funding to be made available for major improvements.
We have a question from Fatima. You want to go? Can you hear me?
I can where was her question again? I can help out. It's the Dr. Dane. Oh, she's one. Oh, yeah. She has a question for me. Are museums like the African American Music Museum in Nashville affected by the DEI rollback? Fatima, I don't know specifically. I would first hope not. I don't think they're really dependent that much on federal funding. And just observationally, as someone who loves that museum and goes to it quite often, their programming has really stepped up in the last year or so. So they obviously seem to have funding to be able to do some really, really cool things at the museum. So, but I don't have a specific answer to know if any of like their grants or were rolled back or anything like that. Thank you.
Do you feel that there are many theaters that have sort of slipped through the cracks over the years that we could have preserved if there was more you know, public relations regarding it? I find that a lot of these theaters, you know, I know specifically in DC, that they were community centers. And I feel like they are quite important to any community. Are there, Charlie, in your research, have you found some that maybe need a little boost, a little PR boost?
Theaters, I didn't really sort of investigate sort of theaters, but you know, clubs, venues, I would say there's a lot, especially in major markets or markets like Nashville, where there's such development pressure and the underlying property. I mean, we again, this has nothing specifically to do with sort of theaters, but you know, this week alone in Nashville, a fellow who's a great sort of preservationist who's preserved the Acme Feed and Seed and the Woolworths on Fifth and Loveless Cafe. His property taxes went up 350% from I think 180 to $600,000 because of the success of Nashville. And basically, when you're operating on thin margins like that, it makes it difficult to be a preservationist, you know, business, you know, capitalist, you know. So there's a lot of venues, I think, clubs and venues, and you know, just to sort of throw this sort of same idea I had from the record industry, I think, you know, in my wish list, Live Nation and AEG Live and CAA and all the big players in the live music field should invest in these clubs, and they do. I mean, there are some clubs that are open because now they're Live Nation venues. So, yeah, but I can't really speak to theaters specifically.
Do you have any tips, any of you, on communities that have a music venue of some type that they value and want to preserve, that things that they can do that through your trial and error and your hard work that you've found that maybe you could share those tips with the people who are participating in the webinar today?
Well, I would say, just to go back to your first question, you know, with clubs, when we were just talking about that, 930 Club is one that, you know, something that DC has, you know, something that's been very much embraced here. 930 Club used to be 930 F Street, and it was a basement of a building. It had the same development pressures that Charlie was just talking about. And it moved into what was a former radio station building, and it's been very successful there. And then next door to it, the Foo Fighters actually built a replica of the building um, with a small club like atmosphere inside of it, because the 930 Club is now, well, it was J. Crew the last time I looked. So the original 930 Club. So, I mean, I think that there's this you know, desire for those types of places. But in DC in particular, we had neighborhood theaters, we had tons of theaters all over the city. There's in the Bloomingdale neighborhood, the Sylvan Theater is now a couple different bar, a restaurant, and a liquor store. Ben's Chili Bowl is in a theater. I mean, there's a lot of different theaters around the city that have just been repurposed as different buildings, and people don't necessarily know that they're actually theaters at that point. But again, DC is a little bit of a different place than some other place, just because of our law that allows us to landmark a site and then find a use for it. So it helps protect it as opposed to, well, you only have 30 days or 60 days to come up with what's going to happen. We have years to do that under our landmark law. So, but it really does come down to finding somebody to use it. And that's one of the most important parts is that you can't have a building just kind of fester and expect to continue to have public support for it or support from your civic leaders. So.
So any thoughts on my previous question about tips for those who are looking to start the process of preserving one of these venues?
Expect to be delayed. Just because, coordinating efforts, community-based organization, larger organization, government entities. I mean, that just takes time.
Yeah, and I'd say get ready to talk to a lot of people. Make sure you kind of have your value proposition, why this matters, why this is not just historically important, but why this can be still of service to the community at large, right? So you want to kind of have a sale in there. So, and just like I said, be prepared to want to and to talk to as many people as possible about, why this place matters, what you are kind of envisioning its place in current and future society is. Yeah.
And don't underestimate how much it's going to cost you.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
mean, I think in the circumstance of, with the Howard Theater, the developer didn't necessarily have a background in nonprofit management or running a music venue or a venue of that sort. So I think they're on their third operator, which is now having much more success, but it was very challenging for a while for Ellis Development to really kind of get that kind of going into something that's, I wouldn't say it's overly profitable, but I think maybe he might be turning a little bit of a profit now. And, but you really have to utilize all these programs and be creative with your financing as to how you're going to do it, whether it be grants and you're consistently putting these types of things together. And we're really lucky in DC as well that we have a very generous Commission on Arts and Humanities, and they try and help people buy buildings as well. So that can help in buying these types of things as well.
Oop, I was muted. We have another question from John Bondurant.
Oh,
John, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Charlie.
hey, John, how are you?
I'm doing great. So I was wondering, just can go out to the whole panel, like, how do you all feel about some of these historic venues and studios being preserved but refurbished into like a non-music venue with acknowledgement of their historic past?
So that's actually a great question, and I'll give you kind of the example, which is the J&M studio, Cosmo Matassa studio in New Orleans, which is very historically important for rhythm and blues and rock and soul and New Orleans music for the last, I don't know, 50, I don't know, since I've been going to New Orleans for the last 20 or so years. It's been a laundromat. So, with a little sign outside, and what I kind of say as a kind of preservationist is, yes, I wish this was turned back into something more recognizable, but at least when you have an active occupant in the building, they are tending to leaks and other structural problems in the building, so that what has currently happened to that building is that the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, who runs Jazz Fest, recently purchased it. I don't know what their plans are for it, but having that sort of in between owner, that at least they're in there, they're active, they're tending to the big structural problems as opposed to, you know, what we had to deal with, like, for example, at King, where the roof was collapsed, the electric was ripped out, all the walls and ceilings were gone, you know, black mold and all the fun stuff that you deal with in there. So, if there's an acknowledgement, I go, at least the pause button has been pressed. And so we have maybe some time when the opportunity affords when we can get our ducks in a row and that opportunity comes forward, we can then jump in, and it won't be, you know, collapsed ceilings and all the stuff that we're currently dealing with at King. So again, I'd prefer it to be more historically accurate, but yeah, I think does that kind of answer your question, John?
I mean,
Okay.
I would say that we always, the thing we always talk about with people, we have this debate sometimes too, when there's about a building in particular. And DC, well, we only have 18 to 20 interior designations. And so we talk about how historic preservation doesn't dictate the use of the building, and of course, there's some significant interiors. I think it's really hard especially on private development, to have the restriction that people feel like they can't make certain changes to the interiors. We tend to do those on more publicly facing buildings like bank halls. We have a train station that has an interior designation and things like that. And so that's where I think a lot of times signage can become really important. And in that kind of interpretation of people celebrating what the history of that particular venue was, even if it's not exactly what that venue is any longer. And you can accomplish that through certain things. Like DCPL has a historic sites app. For instance, we have a go-go and punk tour on it, which takes you right by 930 Club, the old one, even though, yeah. So, but it gives you the history of that type of thing, even though the original 930 doesn't exist any longer. But it does give people the opportunity to come to to read about it and find some photographs so that they can maybe at least imagine what the space was like prior to what it's become.
We're actually at time, and I want to thank all of our panelists for being here, and to all of our participants from the public. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to remind you that this has been recorded, and we will be providing a link to our YouTube to the recording on our YouTube channel, probably by the end of this week or beginning of next week. I'll send emails to everyone. And if you don't have our YouTube link, it's right on the homepage of our website. Don't forget to register for our March, April, and May webinars at the link we are going to share in the chat. And when you close out the webinar, please take a moment to fill out our survey that will pop up. And we use this information to improve our series each year. We look at all your responses and we try to figure that in for next year. So again, follow the ACHP on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get all the latest. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn and ACHP, for having this. This was wonderful.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Indeed.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.